Hi, I'm Skeletons. I make cartoons for a living. And did you know that Sly Cooper actually has some creepypastas out there? Back when I was doing the Sly Cooper iceberg video, there was one of the actual topics that's mentioned about Sly Cooper Nightmare level, and then it actually got me into leading this picture. But besides having this picture open, that opened me up to a creepypasta, so I thought it would be a good idea to read that and some other creepypastas as well that was under this franchise too. So first one we're going to be reading is Sly Cooper's Nightmare. I've been a fan of Sucker Punch games, from the titles like Infamous, and my personal favorite being Sly Cooper. For those who don't know what Sly Cooper is, I recommend looking it up, as it is a very cleverly made game with stealth and combat in a good balance. In the year of 2005, Sucker Punch released its third installment to the franchise Sly Cooper. It left off the series with the main protagonist with amnesia, the game assembling throughout the game that goes to their separate ways, and mentions the time machine after the credits. It was around the age of 9 I discovered using the internet to find cheat codes was possible for me, so immediately I began actually searching through. After rebeating the second title, my mind began to rush through excitement at the third title and the possible cheats. After gaining a certain part in Dimitri's level of retrieving his father's stolen gear, I remembered a cheat code that gets giant lizard things non-hostile that would make the pirate hunting phase a lot easier. After searching through some sites, one in particular caught my eye. It was titled The Nightmare. Nightmare mode was we would change the animations of a certain character and reassemble as a secret area cut out from the game. I tried out the cheat too, but nothing happened. So I simply decided to continue on with my life. Around a year, I decided to replay Sly III because I was confirmed that there was a Sly IV. When I loaded up one of my save files, I retrieved a message popping up in the game saying cheat enabled. I wondered what it meant until I remembered the cheat I did 2 years prior on the save file. To my surprise, everything seems normal at first, but when I went into Bentley through, he was missing his wheelchair and was crawling across the floor to move. When I went to play Bentley, he seemed to be anorexic, missing his huge pink belly. Sly was missing his cane and looked as if he was frantically searching for it. I eventfully scrolled up to the top to the World Select menu, and I saw the new menu was entitled The Nightmare. I was excited that I quickly selected. I was spawned into a purplish open plain with a wall of 4 sides. Shortly after, that jump scare happened in which the final boss of the game appeared to be pounding his chest while standing over the bodies of one of his experiments. Like a cutscene begins a mission, and there was no sounds to the characters' voices, just the text. Murray kicked Bentley to his arm and threw him against the wall and ran. Then the guru appeared on the back of a wolf's back and begins to attack Sly. Then Dimitri attacks the guru with the Panda King, only to be launched with Penelope's RC copter hooks. Then her RC copter was shot down by the Panda King, only to be crushed by the fallen RC. There was no blood or gore, only the smoke that appears when it's defeating an enemy. When the screen went to Sly, Bentley just shouted, "What have you done?" Then I was simply kicked out of the level of the World Select screen. I checked if the Nightmare was still there, and it was. After watching it a few more times, I was still clueless as what was happening in the cutscene. I would have checked the site where I found the cheat code, but the site was deleted over the years. I don't know exactly why somebody would program this cutscene and the character models, and frankly, I don't think I even ever will know. I still love the Sly Cooper franchise. I even own the newest addition to the franchise, but every now and then I'll think about that day. What did Sly do to cause this chaos? The world of gaming will never know. That was so fucking bad. Oh my god, that's so funny. Alright, second one. What I'm about to tell you is completely true. I'm not one of those people that love something unconditionally, but we'll come to the game of one of my favorites is Sly Cooper. I was on my weed then and it happened. The batteries went dead. I went looking for some, but of course, those were the last. So, with nothing else to do, I decided to hook up my old PlayStation 2 that I've been given Christmas a few years ago back. Of course, PlayStations weren't sold in stores anymore, so one that came from the pawn shop. Looking through my 3 stacks of PlayStation 2 games, I come across my 3 Sly games. I had the first 3 games and I really wanted to play the third one, but it was really messed up a few months ago and I wouldn't play the third episode level. So I popped in Sly II Bands of Thieves. It started up normally with the gang running along rooftops getting to the museum in Egypt, but that was one of the first ones happened. When it got to the main menu, which should have Sly walking into a circle, he stood still. No options were on the screen. I tried hitting start in hopes to go directly into my last save file, but nothing really happened. I pressed select to go options, but again, nothing happened. Thinking this would be just a glitch or my game froze, I went to go reset my console. Then I heard Sly say, "I wouldn't do that. We need to get the Clockwerk parts," he mentioned in a monotone voice. I sat back down. Did Sly, the video game character, just talk to me? No, that's ridiculous. There's no way that a fictional character just talked to me. I looked at the screen again and I saw one option. Press X to start the game. What? Not having any other option, I pressed X. The game campaign started normally. Sly pulled out his binoculars and Bentley just went on his normal lines with Sly. After the conversation, I did the normal jumps needed to where you meet Bentley. Once the elevator got into the top, however, Bentley was lying down face dead in a pool of blood. The Sly games were violent, but not like this. There were more cartoony violence, not blood and gore. Bentley now dead, I wouldn't be able to actually pass through the locked gate, but Sly just walked over to Bentley, took something off his person? Wait, took something off of his person. Wait, why? Sly walked over to the gate and placed one of Bentley's bombs. The explosion was powerful enough to go through what the bombs were supposed to do and crippled the bars, bent them enough for Sly to just go through. After this, I walked to where we meet Murray. He did the normal meteoric entrance with his thunder flop. He got up, but instead of talking with Sly, he walked over to the gate and lifted it up. He was supposed to do this only after the cutscene with him and Sly talking. Murray just threw the statue at the balcony at the window that held the Clockwerk parts, but once again, no cutscene. I ran across the rope to get to the parts, but once I reached to the window, the loading screen popped up. Once the game was done loading, I was in the hangar with the fully reconstructed Clockwerk from the last episode level. This wasn't the only strange thing. Thought the parts were in the game. Clockwerk himself wasn't supposed to be here. Neela, one of the characters that helped Sly, was supposed to infuse with Clockwerk's body and create Clockla, but when he spoke, it was Clockwerk's voice. "You will never get rid of me, Koopa. Not you or your little friends." And Clockwerk looked at the screen. At me! Then looked at Sly. "You wouldn't survive this time, Clockwerk. I wouldn't let you, and neither will Alec." Sly knew my name? But how was he? But how? He wasn't real. Was he? Then right before my eyes, the last Cooper gang member died, eaten by Clockwerk, like how Clocklo was supposed to eat Arpeggio, but he just left him behind feathers. He was standing, and Clockwerk had dripping blood from the robotic beak, Sly's blood. Clockwerk was looking back to me. You are next, he said menacingly, robotic voice, and flew off. I suddenly had the feeling that I was being watched, and I walked over to my window and looked out. At first I didn't see anything, but then when I looked up, silhouette against the moon was a giant owl. First creepypasta, please let me know how I did. P.S. Alex isn't my real name, I just used it as a cover-up. Of all of the video game characters, I thought it deserved a creepypasta. Sly and Clockwerk were two of them. Bravo. 8.5 out of 10. This one deserves a fucking 0, dude. This one's funny. There was an action, adventure, stealth platformer that is developed by Sucker Punch Productions. When I was younger, I loved Sly Cooper. It was one of my favorite games from my childhood. Sly II being my favorite games out of the series. The two characters I liked was Inspector Carmelito Montoya Fox and Constable Neela. Too bad she was dead. Unfortunately, I had a bad habit of taking care of my games when I was younger. I left the discs out instead of putting them back in the cases, causing them to get scratches and damages. Most of the games I have are still in perfectly working conditions. However, some of the games are too glitched out or unreadable for my PlayStation 2, and Sly II was one of those games. As I got younger, I started to take care of my games and replace the damaged ones. I was starting my video game collection and decided to replace my damaged copy of Sly II. My grandma owns a antique pawn shop, and my mom would go there to help her with the store. Because of her old age, I would go there, so I had something to do. My grandma's store had stuff typically in an antique store. Old clocks, old furniture, even some miscellaneous items. Rarely she would have something like more modern, like video games from the 90s or from the 20s, such as the original Xbox. Recently, I had to do some store work, and I moved some store items from the back to the place where I came across a copy of Sly II. I checked the disc and it didn't have a scratch on it. I asked my grandma where she even got the game, and she replied that she didn't know. Gets in the store comes from donations from charities and other places. Usually a truck comes by to delivering unique goods. She doesn't know exactly where delivery of the game came from. Eventually I asked her if I can keep the game, and she said yes, since nobody ever buys any of the old games in her store. When I finished, I went home with the game with me. Once I arrived back home, I fired up the PS2 by pressing the start button, and I loaded all of the too familiar black voids with cubes floating, the tall white structures floating in the infamous space, with stars moving back and forth. This was where I noticed something strange. The intro showing Sly sneakily moving around inside the Museum of Natural History was gone. Instead, a black background took its place, displaying the Sly II logo. I also noticed that there was no menu option. It only just had the start option. I clicked start to start the new game, where it immediately threw me into the gameplay. I was in Paris. There was no prologue. I was in the streets, and I was just started roaming around, where I was quickly discovered that there was no rat-like enemies to fight, no coins, no objectives. I tried heading to Dimitri's place, where I found out that it was missing, just black space where it used to be. like it had to been deleted from the game. I went to the safe house to change my characters, and when I discovered that only Sly was sitting on the table, Bentley and Murray weren't there, as if they didn't exist. No power-ups could have been purchased either. I exited the safe house and I spotted a message written in the black text on the pavement. It reads, "Are you ready to play again?" I was confused about the message. As I kept playing, these deviants I kept noticing were unignorable, especially from someone who've played Sly II before. After pointlessly roaming around the level trying to find something that resembles an objective, a cutscene triggered. The camera panned to one of the rooftops where the cinematic black bars folded in. Carmelita Fox jumped into the camera view. She amused a pose, waving her yellow-colored gloves, fists in the air, an animation from Sly I, before screaming, "I'll get you, Cooper!" He didn't fold his arms. His arms were just straight down. His body was unmoving. He gave Carmelita this fearful, worrisome look as if he remained silent. After the cutscene, the gameplay resumes, and Carmelita was firing electric bolts at me. Usually in any Sly game, Carmelita attacks were easy to dodge due to the horrible aim, but this time her attacks were dead on. She shot like a perfect markswoman. I ran down the street as she was firing electric bolts at me, and I tried to find a turn off, an alleyway, or any shortcut, but I didn't find any of them. As I spread down the street, Carmelita's attacks become more difficult to avoid as she kept jumping from rooftop to rooftop, raining down electric bullets. I kept running down the street when I spotted another character in a distance. It was Constable Neela, standing at the far end with no chances of losing her pursuer. I ran towards her as I could, only to go straight. Eventually, I reached the end of the street with Carmelita hot on my tail. I got close enough to Constable Neela to trigger a cutscene. Carmelita stopped firing the electric bullets at me, and Neela spoke. "Cooper, we meet again." It was the same line from the third episode, but what comes next is that I never heard her say in Sly II before. "Cooper, are you ready to play again?" Somehow, when the cutscene ended and the gameplay resumed, Carmelita fired the electric bullet from her shock pistol. I couldn't reach in time to dodge. I got hit, and Sly did his death animation before the game faded to black. The Sly Cooper logo then appeared the black background. As I stared at the screen, I could hear something muffling playing in the background. It sounds like gagging, as if someone was trying to say something but couldn't. I heard chains rattling and something being thrashed. I couldn't be sure, as if they were muffled, like they were being recorded from a horrible microphone from 2004, the same year the game was released. Then I could hear voices. They sounded to be feminine. I couldn't make out anything the voice was saying, as the quality was too poor to hear the voice. They sounded like they were in pleasure or glee. As the thrashing noises got louder, I could hear, to me, like a deep male moaning. This lasted for 2 straight minutes before cutting back into the gameplay. Sly was back at the streets. He looked to be injured. He had a leap with red welts that was streaking across his body with black spots of various sizes, to which I could only presume that it was bruises. "What the hell did they do to you, Sly?" After a few seconds, Sly's promptly corpse to the ground, and the game faded black. It then faded to the title card of A Starry Night Encounter. It's then cut to the gameplay, and I was replaced with a random location. And just like the previous level, there was no enemies and no collectibles. This time, the safe house was inaccessible, despite the logo indicating that the player could access it. However, one jobbed a variable, and that was dominate the dance floor. I went over to Rajan's palace and went up to the door. As I did so, the game cut to black before fading and opening the view of the ballroom. I could see Neela and Carmelita standing on the dance floor. Bentley's dialogue did not play. I couldn't see the other characters in Rajan, as according to the version of this game, he does not exist. There was no cutout silhouettes of the other guests, just Neela and Carmelita Fox. Sly entered into the view of his tuxedo and made his way down to the dance floor. He approaches Constable Neela in usual dialogue like the normal game assumes, and the two dance. The player is then required to press certain buttons in the quick time event to perform a dance moves. This part was easy. However, during this mission, something rather unexpected happened. Neela suddenly stopped the dancing and slapped Sly in the face. Carmelita walked over to the back of Sly and stopped. Two stood there for a minute. They began to tear at Sly's clothes. It was to the point where it almost showed his body. Carmelita and Neela then began undressing. I knew what was going to happen, and at this point, I had enough, where I got up and walked over to my PlayStation 2 before slamming the tip of my Axis finger against the eject button. The blue light flashes, and as I did it, I looked up to the television screen, and Carmelita and Neela stopped undressing, and then the face turned towards the camera, where they gave this piercing, angry glare and stared into my soul before the screen went to black at this PS2 injected to the disc. I took it out of the place back in its case before proceeding to walk over to my game shelf. It's been a few minutes since I played the game, and I don't know what to think of it. This question lingers in my mind. Why? Made as a joke or a prank? Or someone's fetish fuel? I mean, I'm not against that kind of stuff. If it was one of those things, I got to hand it to them. They did a great job. I'm not getting rid of it yet. I don't know where it came from, and I don't know who made it, because all I want is some answers. God, fucking hell, dude. Hi, I'm Jake, and I've been a big fan of Sly Cooper, but I haven't played them for years and I never will again. I started when I was playing Sly Cooper and the Devious Raccoonus, and I wanted to fight Clockwerk, but I died 10 times trying to beat him. So when I went back to my PlayStation 2, back before when I was about to turn the game off, I heard Clockwerk say, "You can't escape forever, Jake." I was creeped out just thinking about it. I checked the time and it was 9:40. I needed to sleep. I heard my phone ringing, and it was my older sister, and she told me that my dad had in his sleep. I was crying, but I realized about what Clockwerk said, so I turned on my PS2, but when I checked, the inside the game was gone, and my PS3 case in it that had a note saying, "Jake, you are afraid to face me like your father." I put in my Sly III and started the game. What was weird, I could only find one place, Flight of Fancy. Bentley and Murray were nowhere to be seen. I could only play as Sly. Another weird thing was that there was no guards, there was no music when I chose Sly. I saw the text box, it said go to the Black Baron's castle, so I used R1 to run, and when I arrived, Sly started to walk in the darkness, and after walking into the darkness, Clockwerk appeared and said, "You finally arrived." I said to myself, "You monster!" Then Clockwerk said, "Enough, Jake. I'll finish you like I finished your father." Then the fight started and I finally beat Clockwerk. and my PS2 turned off itself. It was strange, but I heard a voice came from my TV. "You can't dodge me forever, Jake." Well, that was really fun. I enjoyed reading all of them. None of them were bad. When I put in my PlayStation 2, I started to play Sly Cooper. Sly Cooper was one of my favorite game franchises of all time. When I turned on my PlayStation 2 to play Sly V, it began to actually start glitching out. And then I just realized Sly 5 never existed at all. Boom! Oh my, no! That is the scariest part of it all. It never existed. I hate these.